Madam Chairman, thank you. I'd like to pursue an issue that you brought up in your opening statement, Madam Chairman, relative to the situation as it exists with Iran and its pursuit of nuclearization and the potential Israeli response. And I think based on what was said early, if there's any dispute to the fact that sanctions to date have not brought about results that we would hope for, and I think, Director Clapper, you indicated in your statement, we hope that sanctions will prevent necessity for an Israeli response. I think the evidence is clear, unless there's hard evidence to the contrary that we are not aware of, that sanctions to this point have not made any kind of difference with the regime in Iran. Does anybody dispute that?
No, sir, Senator Coates. That is precisely the intelligence community view or assessment that to this point, the sanctions as imposed so far have not caused them to change their behavior or their policy.
And secondly, Director Clapper, you said we judge Iran would likely choose missile delivery as, no, I'm sorry, we judge Iran's nuclear decision-making is guided by a cost-benefit approach. Iranian leaders undoubtedly consider Iran's security, prestige, and influence as well as international political and security environment when making decisions about its nuclear program. Is there any indication that sanctions to date have changed their view relative from a cost-benefit standpoint?
Well, I think it's fair to say, and we could go into this in more depth in a closed environment, that there is dissension and debate in the political hierarchy of Iran. So there is not unanimity about this, and I do think that to the extent that the international community is united on this, and with the U.S. leadership, I do think they pay attention to international opinion and what others think of them. And certainly, if there are impacts on their oil exports and the extent that that would affect their financial situation, that could have, I think, a profound impact on their decision-making calculus in terms of, as we said, cost-benefit.
But that's more of a hope and a wish than it is a hard reality, from what I understand.
As I said, to this point, the sanctions have not caused that calculus to change, apparently. But as the pressure ratchets up, there is the prospect that they could change.
Would a dramatic decrease in oil prices have a bearing there? But what is the likelihood of that, given the world demand for oil and energy sources?
Well, it could, and that's what we'll have to see how this plays out. And this in turn is dependent on willingness of the main customers of Iran to support that position.
But to date, those main customers are not supporting these sanctions.
Oh, I wouldn't say that. Again, we can discuss this in closed session as who is and who isn't.
Well, okay, we can discuss that in closed session. I don't see any public acknowledgement that China, India, some of the fast-growing Asian nations have joined us in supporting rejecting any kind of export.
If I could, Senator, actually publicly it is well known that China reduced its imports of Iranian oil in the purchases. I mean, these are matters of public record. Remains to be seen whether that continues. It appears that Saudi Arabian production is ramping up and can fill some of the demand that might have been met by Iranian exports now that there are the sanctions on the Central Bank of Iran.
Thank you, Director. But aren't we in a situation where the clock is ticking
Certainly.
clock is ticking on the side of the Iranian pursuit of nuclearization and perhaps weaponization of nuclear capability, and it has been for some time. It's my own view is that it's going to take tougher sanctions that currently exist in order to beat that clock that's ticking toward a nuclear Iran. And so, but also, we see how difficult it is to ratchet up that next level of sanctions and get world community support. I mean, it took us a long time to get European support for the current level of sanctions. We don't have Chinese or Russian support for it. It's unlikely that we would, unless something changes that I'm not aware of. And when you put that in the context of what the Israelis must be thinking, and everybody acknowledges it's an existential question for them, we've got a time factor here. And I just want to be realistic about the fact that the hope that sanctions, it's been described as the hope that sanctions can bring about the desired results that we all want, both from the Iranian standpoint and from the Israeli standpoint. I don't know if any of you'd like to comment.
Well, sir, I think you've very accurately captured the gravity of the situation and what's at stake here, and particularly for what's at stake for the Israelis.
Would a naval blockade, which I guess would be an act of war, naval blockade achieve the kind of cost-benefit ratio that would give them real pause about changing their attitudes? Well,
I don't know, sir. We'd have to take that one under advisement, but perhaps to air out the possibilities there in a closed session. Certainly that would have impact on their calculus. Whether it would move in the direction of a positive outcome or a negative outcome, it's hard to say.
Well, of course, the outcome we want is trending very strongly toward a negative outcome. I mean, the outcome that seems to be taking place is trending strongly toward a negative outcome. The outcome that we want seems to be diminishing, and I hope I'm wrong on this, but it just seems to me that we've had years and years and years of sanctions. It's very difficult to ratchet those up and tighten them to the point where we see a decided change in the Iranian Supreme leadership decisions on this. The recent movement of uranium to Qom and enrichment and the defiance in terms of public statements that come out of Iran all indicate that so far, I mean, maybe they're disputing this internally, but so far we have not seen positive results from that. And when you're viewing it from the Israeli standpoint, it clearly, I think, reaches the level of perhaps the #1 challenge of 2012, as the chairman has indicated. General?
Well, I do think it's...
Excuse me, Director General.
The latest round of sanctions, of course, is really just being felt, and it will take a number of months. But as you note, there is a clock ticking during that time, and there is the inexorable progress, if you will, in the refinement of additional uranium to 3%, then 20%, and a variety of other activities that are ongoing. And again, the IAEA has laid these out very accurately and effectively. But the fact is that the Iranian currency has lost considerable value recently. There are runs on the bank in recent weeks that have been seen as the Iranian citizenry tries to get its money out of their own domestic currency and into anything that will hold its value better, as inflation also takes off. Director Clapper talked about problems of unemployment as well. But the overall situation is one in which the sanctions have been biting much, much more, literally, in recent weeks than they have until this time. So I think what we have to see now is how does that play out? What is the level of popular discontent inside Iran? Does that influence the strategic decision-making of the supreme leader and the regime, keeping in mind that the regime's paramount goal in all that they do is their regime survival?
Right. I have additional questions to pursue, particularly regarding the Israelis' perception of the impact of this, but I think that's better left for a closed session.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.